Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for being with us for this very timely presentation on jumping from employee to being an entrepreneur. It's my pleasure to introduce Karen Marchetti, founder of Avery Grace Careers. For the past 20 years, she has been a successful recruiter and career coach, developing methods and programs to help both the employer and employees succeed in their goals. Welcome.
Thanks, Jay. I appreciate that. I really wanted to do this webinar as part of our monthly series because I get a lot of candidates that I'm coaching, doing some career coaching with that are considering starting their own business. I think it's kind of the American dream, so to speak. And so I thought it would be really useful for them to get a little bit of information about what that realistically looks like. And we are going to be really straight up with the good, the bad, and the ugly, I would say. And we're going to have a special guest tonight as well. So I think what we'll start off with is to give you a little bit of resources to look at as far as places to start if you are considering starting your own business. And I think we have a slide for that. Great, thank you. So the first place to start, in my opinion, would be at the SBA. The SBA, Small Business Administration, is in charge of helping, well, a lot of different things, but one of their main initiatives is to guide people through the process of getting financing for their business. I can tell you that I've started multiple businesses, and it is not great to start out undercapitalized. And so, the task of getting funded for your business is an important one. In addition to that, they have grant information, so they can help you with a lot of that. Now, the Small Business Administration has SBDCs, Small Business Development Centers. Those are the actual execution arms of the SBA. So those are local, and they can help you with a lot of things. First of all, your tax dollars fund this, so you have already paid for it. And they can help you with a lot of classes on how to run a business, how to write a business plan. They also have something called SCORE, the Service Corps of Retired Executives, and that's also free. So they can assign someone to you, and you might have specific questions. You might have questions about, how do I market my business? What's the market for my business? What is the demand? What are other people charging? So all of that they can walk you through. And I did, in fact, take advantage of that myself. And I can tell you that for me, sometimes they told me things I didn't necessarily want to hear. And I pouted a little bit at first until, I sort of went, yeah, well, they know more than me. So let me kind of take this to heart. And many, many times they really saved me from some pretty big mistakes. So, and then finally, the local chambers of commerce also can be extremely helpful because it's in their best interest to see you succeed as well. So those three would be definitely places I would say to start. So in terms of people starting their own business, we've heard some of these statistics before, but I think it really is beneficial to look at them again. So last year there were over 33 million small businesses that started in the U.S. And I think that's fairly consistent from year to year as well. And from March of 2020 to 21, there were, I believe there was 1.1 million small businesses that were brand new that open their doors. But 1 in 5 of those, and that's very consistent, that number, 1 in 5 small businesses will fail within that first year. And half of those are due to lack of market demand. So when I talked about that free counseling and gauging market demand, a lot of times that really is important to do. And the industries with the highest survival rates are healthcare and social assistance. So just to go back to that third bullet point for a second, that really is a lot of businesses to fail. 20% is a big number, especially if it's you, especially if you just took a big chunk of money and maybe your relatives and loved ones' money as well, really, right? A lot of businesses get financed that way. And then there wasn't the demand. That's obviously something that you want to find out ahead of time and really be able to gauge that, because you definitely don't want to be in that 1 out of 2 failed due to that one particular factor. So one thing that I'm really excited about tonight is that we have a special guest, and his name is Anthony Parnell. He has been a business coach and entrepreneur for over 20 years. He's also a published author. He has, I believe, 5 published books. He can tell you a little bit more about that, but he's somebody that I have worked with for a long time. He has coached me, he has mentored me. We have worked on many, many different kinds of business projects together, and he's someone I highly, highly respect. So I'm really excited and pleased that he's going to be joining us tonight. Um, thanks for coming, Anthony.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
Great. Well, that's perfect. Well, um, I've been kind of teeing up a lot of questions for you tonight, and so, I'll throw them out there, and I'm really excited to hear what sort of advice that you would give people. So, the first one is, I know your story already, how you developed your career path, but, maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you came to be where you are now.
It's really interesting that I was on the path to in the mental health nonprofit field, working on my master's in social work, and this writing energy started coming out of me, and I started writing a lot of poems over a 3-day period. One Thanksgiving holiday, I wrote my entire life story. It just poured out of me, 100 and something pages in about 4 days, and I slowly began to realize I had a gift for writing. So I started actually putting manuscripts together, started putting book proposals together and sending them to publishers. And I received rejection letter after rejection after rejection. So my first dabble in entrepreneurship was starting to self-publish. That's when the industry was changing, new technology was coming out with printers they call Docutech, which we now hear as print on demand, which brought the cost down. So the first thing I did was started self-publishing books because publishers rejected me. Over time, as I continued in the mental health field, I got into upper management, began running multi-million-dollar nonprofit organizations. So I had to start looking at budgets. I had to start dealing with hiring and firing. How do you build teams? And then other people started, seeking me for consulting and guidance. I learned how to write business plans, started going to the library, getting books. So that's really has been the trajectory of what got me started in the first part to dabble into the entrepreneur world.
Excellent. So, as you were talking, it kind of occurs to me, I mean, what sort of educational background did you have? Did you sort of think of that before you took your education, or how did that unfold?
No, if I'm allowed to use humor during this webinar, all I knew is I wanted to be rich. Coming up as a kid, we would play this game called bingo. You see cars coming down the street, and the first one to go bingo, that's mine. So I knew I wanted to make money, but I wasn't sure how to do it. And as I said, I went into a field that typically most people don't make a lot of money. It's more so because of the heart or the calling when you're in the nonprofit social service field. So I had to transition to find other ways to be able to figure out how I'm going to find a path to make more money. So no, it was very, very different for me. I didn't start off knowing exactly what I was going to do to make a lot of money.
Interesting. Okay. So, I see this a lot in terms of myself and you, but a lot of my candidates as well. In your opinion, do you feel as though a lot of people start out and take their degrees in one field and then end up doing something completely different, or what has your observation been about that?
Yeah, it's definitely been, but at the same time, different people have different barometers of risk factor, right? And I know that a person like Susie Orman has said that if you're going to invest, people have different levels of risk that they can tolerate. So I feel the same is true with whether people are going to pursue entrepreneurship if they weren't exposed to it earlier. I wasn't exposed to it earlier, but I have a high risk tolerance. I'm willing to take risks. So I really think that comes down to whether a person is so focused on their job security, they may have a clear passion, a clear business they want to start, but they could be too afraid to do it. And that's why I was excited to be on this webinar, because I know that there's a lot of people that do want to transition to entrepreneurship, but it's too nerve-wracking, it's too scary to do that.
That's a good point, and I'd like to come back to it. Um, and in general, that kind of leads me into my next question: is what sort of insights would you like to share in terms of um, your observations as a business coach?
Well, I would say, the first thing is your psychology, that if you're too afraid to do it, there is value in trying to figure out how you can build your confidence first. Because in anything that you do, even if you're in a great job, if your confidence is low, you're not going to perform at the highest level. And we now live in an age that so much information is available. Like I said, 20 something years ago, I went to the library to get books on writing business plans. Now with Google, classes, YouTube, basically anything you want to educate yourself on or any aspect of business is right at your fingertips just by going to YouTube. So I think that is the number one thing. If you're not feeling confident, stop from going forward and see what you can do to strengthen your psychology. Grab as many books as you can, read as much as you can, watch as many YouTube videos. And then when you begin to feel more confident, then that would be another barometer for say, now I'm ready to take some of these risks.
Excellent. Excellent. And that kind of plays into a little bit in terms of, you talked about risk management. Do you feel as though, would it be one of your insights that the person has to have a certain tolerance for risk to even really consider going off on their own?
Absolutely not. It's just that self-awareness is always going to be very helpful to anyone in any situation. But there's a word that I learned in the therapy world, process. So I think that once again, with that psychology, no matter how scared you are, if you understand that growing a business and starting a business is a process, don't worry about everything that's way in the future. Yes, let's figure out the first 1, 2, 3 steps, and you know what your other 10 steps are. But now that we know that, let's not put attention on that. Let's deal with step 1, step 2, step 3. Baseball, you got first base, second base, third base. So that's the part where I think becomes intimidating. Yeah, you want a plan, you want long-term goals, but then you have to go back to the short-term, more immediate. And a lot of people are unable to do that because they're so afraid of what's going to happen in the future, rather than saying, I got to take the baby steps right now.
Mm, okay. All right. Let's see. The next question that I'd like to ask is about the biggest mistake that you ever had. And then secondarily, if you have any regrets or, something like that.
Clearly for me, my biggest mistake was I was at a high paying job. I had reached the peak of my profession to the point I had a company car, all expenses paid. But at the same time, things were taking off with coaching. Things were taking off with my books. I had an agent. I was getting on TV interviews, radio interviews. So I was like, yes, this is the time. I could go ahead and leave that job. So I left the job prematurely and things did not take off. So the biggest thought that I have is much of what I've learned, even working with you, what you do with career coaching. You've given the great advice that people are most attractive to get their next job when they're at a job. So given I was at the peak of my job, I could have just went to find some part-time job, because I could have leveraged that to be a part-time executive director or something like that. And then that would give me some steady revenue, some steady cash still coming in. And it still would free up at least 20 of my hours to devote to the business. Because that's what you're feeling when you're working 40 hours or more. Your mind is saying, if I just had 5 hours, if I just had 10 extra hours a week, this is what could happen with my business. So you don't have to go cold turkey. If you've already built up great experience and skills in what you're doing, there probably are some avenues to work part-time that gives you cash at the same time while you freed up more time with your business.
That's a good point. I think that's a good point, because once you quit your job, it's I don't want to say it's final, right? But it's definitely something where there goes your income. So yeah, that's a really good point. I think, there was a conversation that you and I had previously as well. Do you feel as though having a network of people to help you when you had questions was important? And what did that network of people look like?
Well, some people are fortunate that they grew up from their childhood and they saw entrepreneurship. I didn't. So I would say that's the number one thing. If you already, while you're thinking about it, have people in your circle that are entrepreneurs, I would invite them to dinner. I would invite them to lunch, and I would ask them, I'm about to start working on a business plan for what I want to do. Do you mind reading it and giving me critical feedback? I think that is a phenomenal thing. If you don't have access to entrepreneurs, it goes right back to the resources that you put at the beginning. The government has a lot of things out there, the SBA, but there's those local SBDCs. And just to share with you, that's one of the avenues I followed. They had 10 weeks of courses that I could take to learn a range of things, marketing, and they had different facilitators that came in to teach the different things, how to write a business plan, how to market, how to do sales. And if you completed and went for those 3-hour courses, those 10 different courses, and had a business plan, you then can go in front of a committee and could get a loan up to $15,000. So there's a lot of SBDCs that offer it based on you completing the workshops and classes that they have. So that is another great resource that will give you people around you that's going to be able to help you.
Excellent. Excellent. I also hear a lot of people that maybe underestimate how much cash they need. And, for me, I made that mistake. I definitely feel like my primary business that, I had started years ago was definitely undercapitalized. Do you feel like that is one of the most common mistakes, or what do you feel are the most common mistakes?
Yeah, definitely. At the top of the list, not having enough cash. And then secondly, not having the management skills. Because even if you are low with your budget and you hire some subcontractors or part-time people, or you hire that first full-time employee, a lot of people are not comfortable supervising or managing people if they haven't had that type of experience. But more specifically with the running out of cash, people will hear that and they'll say that, but I believe that it's much deeper than that. It's how you approach looking at your cash. So for example, people will say you need a business plan. But even with what I do as a business coach, I tell people within a business plan, the words that you write in it are not the most important thing. What's most important is the financial projections that are within your business plan. So that right there already can save you a lot of money, a lot of time, if you put your emphasis on having projections that are on an Excel spreadsheet, and they're at least 3 to 5 years. It's going to have revenue streams at the top. It's going to have all of your expenses at the bottom. And most importantly, you're going to see what your profit or loss is each month and or at the end of each year. That's where you then can make a good decision about how much cash you need to get through that first year. And also this key term that we have, what does it take to get to break even? How many clients, how many units, how many products do I have to sell? So when you're able to comfortably answer that, I must get 10 clients or I must sell 1,000 t-shirts a month to be my break even. Right now, I'm only selling 200. That's when the light bulb can go off, that you can feel more comfortable about how much cash you really need to sustain you.
Excellent. Yeah, I would definitely feel like, that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. So, you've done well over time. What do you feel have been the best things that you've achieved as a result of your experience as an entrepreneur?
Well, you know, I discovered at least 20 years ago what I'm most passionate about, what my passions are. So being able to wake up every day doing what I love, that's what was driving me to find a way to transition out of 9 to 5. So that number one, doing what I love and spending more time doing what I love rather than spending time doing things I don't want to do. Secondly, it is an adrenaline rush for me to help people reach their full potential and to see people grow, to see things go from point A to point B to point C. That's a high for me. And one particular client, when I first started working with them probably 10 years ago, they had just come out of school, graduated, had an engineering degree. So of course they could have went on and had a great middle-class lifestyle, but they were like, there's something different, but they didn't know what it was. They met me and start trying to ask me to help them find this new path. And it was really difficult for them. They didn't have a lot of money. They shared apartments with 3 or 4 other recent grads to try and save money, and they really struggled. But I'm really excited to know that I was a part of the process, that this business owner now has multiple businesses that generate $1 million a year. But they continued through the process. And like I said, they're one of those people that grabbed and read every book possible, Think and Grow Rich, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I mean, each week or two, they're telling me what book they read, you know, so that's the big high for me, is helping people grow and then waking up doing what I love.
Excellent. Excellent. And I guess if I can chime in here too, is that, for me, obviously the recruiting and career coaching has its own inherent rewards, because you're really helping a company to grow as well as helping the candidate to find something that really is going to be um, helping them to achieve their career goals. So that's wonderful. But just, I think the process of creating a business, years ago, we were part of a survey by a gentleman called Robert Ronstadt. I believe he was with the University of Michigan, and he had created some software that was the precursor to basic accounting software now. And he had a theory that called the corridor principle, is that once you start one business, you're more likely to start a second business and basically be a serial entrepreneur. Have you observed that yourself?
Yes, definitely. I think, one of the things is some people actually are born with a certain spirit, entrepreneurial spirit and or creative spirit. So definitely those people are highly inclined to do that. I think the second thing is those businesses that get over a $500,000 or $1 million threshold, they're much more likely because they're going to constantly be looking for ways to maintain the lifestyle they have and also how to grow their wealth. So definitely I've seen that a lot. It's just, you got to get over that initial hump unless you're just such a creative entrepreneurial creative spirit.
Right, right. And so, you always look back and wonder, I wish I had known this before. What things would you wish that you had known before you started this entrepreneurial journey?
Well, even separate from what I would have known, when I see the words on the screen, what you wish someone had told you, I wish someone had said, I'll be there for you no matter what. Because like I said, when you come from a family that is not entrepreneurial, their mindset is only staying at a job 30 years is what's going to give you security. You let your 401k sit there and grow, and you have that pension to count on, and you're doing totally opposite of what they're thinking. They think you're crazy. That's a very painful process. And your mind has to be very strong. You have to have a lot of self-belief. And it would have been wonderful to hear that I'm going to take this path, and someone close to me would have said, this is what you must do because this is so strong in your spirit. I got you. If it gets so tough, you can't pay your rent, you can't feed yourself, I'm here for you. So that's the biggest thing I wish I had. Now, because I persevered, I have a lot of support from my family. Oh, they're on board, they're telling friends and all that because I persevered. I'm on the other side. So I'm not bitter about it, but that's an easy question for me to ask. So I wish I would have had that back then.
Interesting. I think that's a really valid point of view. And for me, I would say that there was definitely a lot of people that did encourage me, but if anything, they were too nice about it. Like, oh man, you got this. This is great. You're going to rock this. When really, I kind of needed somebody to modulate my,
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's see
you
your
know?
business plan. Or like, can we see your business plan? Yeah.
Yeah, and look, you know what? That's their job. My loved ones, it's their job to be my cheerleader, and I
Yeah.
appreciated it. Really, I really did. But I think it really bears mentioning that you need people in your circle too that are willing to, have some real talk with you. If you're really kind of, just going off the path there and acting crazy. So, yeah, just probably two sides of the same coin. So, in terms of the qualities of a successful entrepreneur, I read something today by Mark Cuban, who hits his opinion that it's effort. Do you agree or disagree with that? And what are your observations in terms of your journey about the qualities that make a successful entrepreneur?
Well, I actually personally just feel that the list is long of qualities that we can say that makes an entrepreneur successful. So I don't think that, someone could just say, oh, it's these three things, because there's variables. There's variables like some people have access to a bunch of cash to start a business, right? Some people have the variable of they're going in the industry that is hot as wildfire, and they don't have any business knowledge whatsoever. They have no idea what they're doing. They're horrible with people, but they went in the perfect industry at the perfect time. So that money just starts coming in. So I don't really believe anymore when people just say, oh, it's these three things, right? Because there's too many variables there. What I do believe, if you're going to have long-term success as an entrepreneur, is I'll firstly borrow from Robert Kiyosaki. Know the difference between assets and liabilities and get comfortable with it and don't feel guilty about it. What puts money in your pocket and what takes money out of it? Because you really want to be able to look at the business as a business. Is it making a profit? And how do I get to profitability? And if you're at that business for 3 years, 5 years, and just lost, you really need to be willing to ask yourself, is this a business or is it a hobby? So that's number one. Number two is self-belief. You know, people don't really think that's a powerful thing, but it really is. Because I could tell you right now, out of 6 clients I met with over the last 4 days, we were on a shared screen on a Google Doc. And I said, let's revisit your 5-year projections. And I'm writing them on there. And I'm telling them, say your projections. You would not believe, even some people whose business is making 80,000 a year, some making 150, it gets uncomfortable to project yourself into the future and say, I believe in year 3, this business is going to make 350,000. And I'm thinking, no, for what you're doing, we need to be projecting 450. So that self-belief is a powerful thing. So I would say those two. Be comfortable with the concept of assets and liabilities, educate yourself on that as much as possible, and constantly feed yourself audiobooks, reading books, surrounding yourself with other like-minded people to keep your self-belief as strong as possible.
Interesting. One other question that I had as well, when I came to a point where I was going to sell one of my businesses, I had an interesting reaction from people that I told that I was doing that in, my friends and family circle. I mean, it was as though I was selling my child. They were like, "What do you mean you're going to sell your business? How could this be?" But, in my opinion, it had been for sale since day one. It just took me 10 years to find
Oh,
somebody to pay
wow.
me what
Yes,
I thought it
yes,
was
yep,
worth,
yep.
right? So I guess, do you typically recommend that this person have some sort of an exit strategy? And at what point do they develop that?
Yeah, you should, but the exit strategy still can be, I want it to remain a privately held uh, company or publicly and not get sold, or I want to pass this on to a family member. So I just think the bottom line is, what are your long-term goals? Be clear about it and be at peace with it, and try and gather as much information and do as much preparation around the probability of you accomplishing that.
Very good advice. Very good advice. So we talked about your belief that you left your job prematurely. And right now, my observations about the job market is that I don't think it's quite as strong as we're hearing on the news, just my opinion. And I hate to see people, suffer financial insecurity. So, you know, um, tell me a little bit about what you feel people should do before they leave their job to prepare.
Um, I think, some of it is part of what they probably have already heard, write a business plan, and think about how much cash you need. But like I say, I would go deeper, even with that business plan. Don't just write it. Like I said earlier, find 3 experienced entrepreneurs that will agree to read the business plan and give you critical feedback, because there's a lot that you won't see, you won't know, and that's going to be very valuable. I think the other thing is write out a month by month plan. So right now, let's say you're at a 9 to 5. In 18 months, I would like to transition out of my job. So these are the things I need to be doing within my business when I'm not at work. And this is the amount of money I want to try and save every month to try and have this amount of money from savings plus whatever profits come from the business. So if that's $200 a month from my paycheck, 500, I think writing those 2 paths and having something that really has a timeline and what you're trying to get done each single month towards that timeline is very, very, very critical.
Interesting. I remember when I took my business classes at the SBDC, even once we went through our business plans and were guided through those, when we got to the end, they still said, okay, see that expense number? Just multiply that by 3.
Yeah,
See that
yeah,
estimate of time that you think it's going to take? Do the same thing. Is
yeah.
that, I mean, do you feel like you would agree with that?
I would say at least times 2, because it gives you a cushion. Because like I say, there's always variables. But even with that, with what you're saying right there, like what we have on the screen, let's say part-time, you've been doing this business and the most you've made per month is $2,000, right? Part of what your goal could be is once I get this to 6,000 or 7,000 a month, 3 months after that, if I could do that 3 months in a row or 6 months in a row, those are other ways that you can approach it as well. The second part of it is, once again, going back to that Excel spreadsheet. Like I said, my concept of writing a business plan is, yes, you have all these written pages, but the bigger thing is that you need this Excel spreadsheet to be very detailed for 5-year projections that you're going to have. And in doing that, you're going to see if you're at your full salary, whatever subcontract people you need, whatever expenses, what is that monthly break even? If someone asks you about your business, you should be able to say, my break even, which includes paying myself, is $7,000 a month or whatever it is. Then you can do multiples of that. Until I have 3 months or 6 months of my break even, that would be another barometer. So there's different ways you can approach it.
Excellent. We have a slide up now that is kind of a proactive checklist um, that kind of touches on this as well. So maybe you can kind of point out any other important bullet points there and expand on those.
All right, so it's great that the 5-year financial projections is there. And once again, the critical point I'm emphasizing is people will hear financial projections a lot, but I'm saying projections that are not on a Word document, not on a Google Doc. It's on an Excel spreadsheet, so you can clearly delineate at the top what's Excel, what's your revenue that's coming in, and then what's your expenses and what's your profit loss. When you get to the business plan, your executive summary is a very critical thing. You're going to have all these pages, but the 3 to 5 page executive summary is a snapshot that needs to be very fine-tuned for any potential funder, any potential investor to see. And also, when you're able to do that, you're going to have a very clear concept of your business. Kind of like what they say, what's that term that they use when you give your bulletproof speech? What's the phrase that we use for that? Where you're able to tell someone in a minute or less what your business is
Elevator
about.
speech.
Yeah, there you go. So in
Yeah.
having your 3 to 5 page executive summary, that's getting you closer to feel comfortable just naturally saying what your elevator pitch is. Pro forma is a more formal term that's out there for your financial projections, where rather than just it being done initially possibly on an Excel spreadsheet, it's going to encompass the three primary financial statements that banks, lenders, and investors look for. They want to have your balance sheet, they want your profit and loss statement, and a cash flow statement. So the other part of that is if you already have a business that's making money, QuickBooks or something like that can generate those. But if this is a business that doesn't have revenue, you're still doing projections with all of those still projected into future. If the business made this money, had these expenses, had these assets. We have on here competition. And like we were saying, not just saying the amount of money that you need for your business because you've done some detailed financial projections. What avenues do you see yourself going to get that money? A lot of people don't know that even when you go to the SBA that's meant to fund businesses, if your business is still small, the SBA will look at your personal credit, right? You're thinking, oh, I'm going to go apply for a business loan. They're just going to look at what's with the business. And it's so unfortunate that more people don't know that and they get all excited and start going through the process. So that's another thing you can put on your 1 year, 18-month timeline, for example, is what do I need to do to bump my credit score to a certain level to position me better to get the financing? Because they also are going to want to know what collateral do you have. If it's not an actual asset collateral, what savings do I have in the bank to represent that collateral? So these are other things that could really help you create a great transition plan that's, you know, a year or 18 months. You've touched on this before. No matter what size your business is, you want to know a bookkeeper, and either you might be doing the bookkeeping yourself through QuickBooks or paying somebody $100, $200 a month to do your books, but you still also want access to a CPA accountant, someone who could really look at what your tax savings are, not just at the end of the year, but every quarter, based on what you're doing with your business, to find ways, thinking ahead of time to save you money. And you always want some type of business attorney that you have access to. And then, like I've said, and we both said throughout, educate yourself, educate yourself. And like I said, the world is so open now, you don't have to drive to the library to get a printed copy of a book. You can be connected to several databases that allow you at any time to listen to audio books, and be able to download books and order books to be shipped directly to your house. So that constant educating yourself is really, really critical.
Right. I think these are really strong, bullet points on this checklist. I would kind of add just a little bit of my own history. When at one point I had a software product, a couple of them actually, and I had registered a trademark and I had spent the money. I mean, I went and got the best attorney that I could get. And after we were awarded that trademark, we had been using it in commerce for several years. I was served with papers from a very large company that could have squashed me like a bug and kept right on going. They served me on Christmas Eve. Thanks for that. And so it kind of went back and forth. I mean, obviously, I called my lawyer, and it turned out that I was able to keep my mark because I had spent the money and it was protected. And it still could have ended badly, honestly. I mean, there's never any guarantees once you get the lawyers involved. But I was so glad that I had really bitten the bullet and spent that money. So yeah, these are great. These are great. These are great action items on the checklist. So I wanted to remind all the participants too, if you have any questions, put them in the chat, and we definitely will go ahead and take a run at those. I do have one question actually too, Anthony, and I'm not sure you can even necessarily answer it, but I talked to a small business owner today. They've been in business over 20 years. And when COVID came, they found that their expenses went up by about 70%. And the reason why their expenses went up that much was that they had to pay their people more to stay. There was this mad scramble for employees. They also increased the amount of money that they paid for the benefit packages and made those benefit packages more robust. Now they've gotten to a point, COVID's pretty much over with, and now they've got this much larger overhead, and so their profits are definitely down. Are you hearing that from more, some of your clients? And, what's your take on what to do about that?
I'm hearing it more so from it's harder to keep good people. So
Mm,
yes, you have to listen better to find the range of things that are needed, whether it's benefits, increased pay, flexibility. Um, Now a lot of people are doing the hybrid because it's a mixture of just telling you have to fully be back in the office. So I think that's the bigger thing that I've been hearing, but you do have to be prepared to spend more money. And that's
right,
that's a trigger for some people who are used to making a much higher profit margin.
right, right. So what are you hearing from your clients in terms of the biggest obstacles that they're running into right now with market conditions the way they are?
Believe it or not, for women entrepreneurs, which is actually one of the fastest growing groups of entrepreneurs in America, there's tons of money out there. It might not be as easy through the SBAs, but particularly if you're in tech or anything like that, there's a lot of new venture capital firms, private equity firms that have been created specifically to help small businesses. So I would say anyone who's looking for funding, do a lot of Google searches and find if what your industry, where the money is with a lot of these different firms out there. So I think that is one of my biggest things. There's a lot more cash that's available for these startup businesses than typically have been there the last few years, because a lot happened with COVID. It happened with different things that's going on in society racially, but it's also the realizing that we needed to reboost the economy to get back going to a higher level after what happened during COVID.
Right. Excellent. Well, we have a couple of questions that have come in. The first question is, how do I begin marketing my company?
Well, that always is going to be very specific to the industry, because there's some other things you want to focus there. But I would say first, write out all 10 things that you can picture for marketing. And the first thing you want to do is create what I call is a prioritized marketing plan. So e-newsletters still for some businesses are relevant. A lot of people are saying if you are on social media, you need to be posting at least 3 times a week, for example. So whatever those different range things are, going to networking meetings, Google ads and Facebook ads are known to be some of the best for going directly to your targeted customer, but they're very expensive. So you still want that on your list. So whatever that range of things are, do that first and then try and prioritize them. And once again, getting other experts. Upwork is a website that I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on, and it's a lot of things I've been able to do, all because I've learned to maximize Upwork. So even if you, for example, hire some marketing person on Upwork as opposed to $1,000 a month, you could get great value with $250 a month as a start. And now, rather than you just trying to look at your marketing plan, you have someone else that's in that field to be giving you constant feedback and help hold you accountable.
Mm, that's great advice. I love that prioritized marketing plan. I like that. Next question, how do you get past fear when coming up against obstacles to keep going?
A great book to read is called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He was a mentee of billionaire Andrew Carnegie. And there's a concept that we hear it now, but he was using this back in the 1920s and he called it mastermind. So I think if you just sit right now and you write on a piece of paper and say, what circle of people, even if they're not great or well experienced in entrepreneurship, what circle of people give me positive energy and positive affirmations towards what I'm trying to do as an entrepreneur?
Wow.
And spend as much time with them talk to them as much, know that that's the list of people you can go to. Secondly, take it to another level. What entrepreneurs can I meet with every week? And Andrew Carnegie actually said this, the other billionaires like Ford, he would talk to them to find out what they're doing in their industry. So I think that fear is not just what you're feeling about the business being successful. You have to get over the fear of asking for help. You have to get over the fear of reaching out to people and specifically saying to people, will you be my mentor? And you'll be shocked that a lot of people who are in business, it's a high for them. It strokes their ego. So there probably is someone in your circle that is an entrepreneur. Say to them, can I pay to take you out to lunch once a month just so I could tell you what's going on with me as an entrepreneur? That will take you miles ahead very, very quickly.
Right. It shows you you're not the only one in that boat. That person has been there
Exactly.
as well.
Exactly.
Right. Right.
But if I can jump back in, but that is part of why a lot of startups get into trouble, is they're spending so much time on their own trying to figure out stuff that other people have already made the mistakes. It is a difference if you don't have access to it, right? But fortunately, what did we just do? We started this webinar by showing you 2 or 3 specific sources that you can go to get coaching. SCORE, they only give you maybe 1 to 3 sessions, but it still is a start. The SBDC, if you go through a lot of their programs, some of them will give you 10 hours of coaching and they'll tell you what classes they can go to. And then you also put on there the Chamber of Commerce. So that is a little costly. Some chambers do cost a little bit, but what will happen? You're going to be surrounded by other businesses. You're going to be around businesses that are making 10 times, 5 times more than you. And that's how you grow. You're able to feed off their energy. And that may be where you find your mentor. So
I love that. I love that. Okay, final question was, how do you keep from overestimating your revenue projections as you're first starting?
well, once again, if you're first starting, you don't have anything to compare it to. So you don't want to jump out there if you have not found those 2 or 3 people who have been in business that will look at your business plan. And like I said, my emphasis with the business plan is not the narrative. Yes, that's important, but numero uno is your financial projections. So you don't want to write a so-called beautiful business plan. You don't want to do so-called wonderful financial projections and take your business from just what you're doing part-time to full-time. You want to find some people to look at it, sit with it, and give you feedback. So that's how I feel you avoid that, is you've had some good people look at it, give you feedback to give you a whole nother level of confidence, because you may have to change some things. And that's what that part of that process is, by using those Excel spreadsheets. Sometimes it takes 2 or 3 weeks of playing with it, working with it, seeing the profit or loss change, and then being totally at peace and comfortable with it yourself. Sometimes that takes a few weeks or stepping away from it, and it might take a few months. So I think that is key, to be comfortable with that process until you're really, really at peace with it.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. Well, thank you so much, Anthony, for being with us tonight, and for everybody who joined us. If you would like to follow up with Anthony or myself, when you signed up, we have your email address. So we will be emailing you a link to this presentation so you can play it again if you would like. And you can also reply to that if you have any follow-up questions that you'd like to ask privately. And so thank you to everyone, and to Jay for running our technology tonight. And I hope everyone out there is going to be successful and happy and has a wonderful end of the week. So thanks again for tuning in.